It is the first slide of your deck, but I believe it should be made at the end. I think Blissclub comes to mind. It's enabling the women of India to lead an active lifestyle.
As simple as that.
It's very good attempt at, solving it via one-liner which communicates everything very easily.
It's very important to grab people's attentions right up front. Like, you have to let them know why they should listen to you. But if you are been around for a while and you have good quality growth metrics, you can show your stellar growth metrics or deep customer validation. However, if you are still in the concept stage and you don't have user engagement or product market fit or growth, then it's still worthwhile highlighting the severity of pain point and how broken that current market is.
These 3 logos in that space, once they're up on the slide, I'm again sitting up on my chair. I'm like, bhai, tell me what's next.
You should find creative ways to highlight depth of your founding team or your first level or second level team's caliber, right? I think founders who are listening to this should really push themselves to be ambitious and bold in painting that picture.
Most people often think that, if you have to show impact, if you have to show traction, if you have to show results, it has to be quantitative. I disagree,
It's okay. Let's do this. For most, we'll start from top. That's just it. Welcome to a brand new podcast property from Elevation Capital, No BS. No BS aims to educate and guide founders through their journey from ideation to funding. It leverages our extensive experience working with and advising the best early stage founders in India over the last 20 plus years. Why are we doing this? Through our experiences, we have realized that there is a common set of questions that anybody who's very early in their entrepreneurship journey encounters and wants to solve. Surprisingly, even though the Indian venture ecosystem has deepened so much, there's no authoritative source for this sort of knowledge and expertise. Our attempt with No BS will be to bring all our tribal knowledge accumulated over the years to the benefit of anybody who's very early in their journey and help them better understand and traverse the challenges of starting and scaling their ventures. That includes questions like, what should a great pitch deck communicate? When should I approach investors? Do I need a co-founder? And if so, how to find them? Understanding and negotiating a term sheet. Join the team at Elevation as we break these down and more. No theoretical advice, just real practical knowledge with zero fluff. Welcome to No BS. On the first episode is about how you can craft the perfect pitch deck. Let's get started. To kick off the first episode in this series, we have with us today Vaibhav from the consumer brands practice here at Elevation and Kshitij or KJ from the fintech practice. Between them, they have 8 years of investing experience and have in the process seen thousands of pitch decks. For most founders, the first impression they leave with a VC is through their pitch deck. While the deck in itself does not lead to a final investment decision, it is a great way to get the conversation started on a high note. Before we get into discussing the deck itself, I want to ask the both of you this. Why do you think a pitch deck is important?
Yeah, so Krishna, I can take that. In my mind, there are 3 things, and Vaibhav, you can add why a pitch deck is important. So one, I think the most important thing in the process of building a pitch deck is that, like, when you're a founder, you have 1,000 different narratives going around in your head, right? Like, you're firefighting daily, you're running operations, you're hiring, you're doing this and that. But it really, building a pitch deck before a fundraising process really allows you to step back and clarify the narrative of your business. So can you lay down everything there is on your business, bucket them into neat places where a few of them can and clearly encapsulate what your business stands for. So the process of building the pitch deck will really sort of help you define that narrative of what your business is about. And once you're clear in your head, you can communicate that much better to anyone in the external world. Second, it's also like a linchpin in the fundraising process. Like, usually any introduction is teed off through a pitch deck. And thirdly, it's the backbone of any conversation. So when you're talking to a VC, it's not necessary that in 90% of the conversations, you might not even walk through your pitch deck. But essentially, it's the backbone of the conversation to go back and refer to. And through the slides is where the conversation really evolves into a free-flowing chat where people go deeper into the business, ask you questions, and also they get excited about the business by looking at some of the things you've highlighted in your pitch deck. So I would say those are the 3 most important things as to why pitch deck is important. But I would also like to add that while you have a pitch deck, that doesn't guarantee a fundraise. The more important thing is that you need to be able to weave the right story around the pitch deck. And maybe Vaibhav, you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think quite often what I see with founders is, once they have a pitch deck, it just becomes very formulaic, right? You are just referring to slides, keep changing slides. This is what it is. This is what it is. This is what it is. I think it is important, as KJ was mentioning, to bring out the story. And pitch deck is just an anchor point, right? What is important is you should have clarity and you should have a story to tell. Actually, I look back on my consulting days, and one of the things we used to do was, before creating the pitch deck, you write your story down in a Word document and think of it as, it can be paragraphs also, right? Like, this is what I found, this is what was interesting, this is what I wanted to solve via it, etc., etc. And then those one-liners become the headline of your deck. So there's a story, and that story translates into a pitch deck, and then those headliners, then you create a slide around it, right? So creating these Word documents, creating this clarity of story is actually very useful. And it makes it more conversational, right? It helps you come across as a human. You have a story to tell. I think it is very important. I think a couple of more tips there would be, once you are communicating as a story and not just a fact base, you can also talk about a little bit about your vulnerabilities, right? Because this is what I tried, this did not work, I failed here, and hence I moved to this. Now, if you think of a pitch deck as a very formulaic thing, this will never come across, but you can use that to, weave into your story and then communicate that to the investor. So yeah, I mean, pitch decks are very important, and it helps you present that story, which makes it more human and relatable. I think that is important.
So to sum it up, a pitch deck is important because they help structure the overall conversation. They're not the be-all, end-all. They know that makes or breaks your pitch, but it helps both the founders think through why and what they're building, and also helps VCs understand where the founder is coming from.
Yeah, so I think to add a little bit as to what we have seen works in pitch decks, right? Like, I think like through like both Vaibhav and I have sort of been in the investing world for a while, and we believe that there are 6 or 7 principles that really crystallize what makes a good pitch deck. And I'll first list them down, and then maybe we can go deeper into each of them. But I think they go like break down in the following way. So first and most important thing is you need to introduce your business very concisely. So encapsulating what the business is about. Second is you need to captivate your audience. Why should they listen to you? And that has to come up front. Like to what Vaibhav was saying in terms of storytelling, you need to really add something right at the front of your pitch deck to say, why should the audience listen? Why should they sort of continue paying attention to you? Third is, once you have their attention, you can now go deeper into what you're building, your insights and your product. Fourth, once you've spoken about your insights and product, you can talk a little bit about the results of your insight and product, right? And I think like these 4 points cover most of the business. Then it's a good point to bring up the team and why we are special as a team, right? Like what sets us apart? Why do we have a unfair advantage to win in the space that we are building in? And lastly, it's also very important to paint the ambition and aspiration that you overall as a team have. So I would say these 6 principles really crystallize what a good pitch deck is about. And let's go a little deeper on each.
Yeah, no, that is a great construct, KJ. And yeah, of course, it will be good to understand this in a bit more detail. Getting into the first principle is to introduce concisely. I know this seems simple, by the looks of it, but I presume this must be like the hardest because makes the first impressions the first thing, a VC would open. How does a founder get to this one-liner?
Yeah, I mean, enough has been said about, how you should always have an elevator pitch ready, how you should be able to define your company in one line, how you should be able to introduce concisely. I think one of the things that have helped me and which I have spoken to good founders and how they have solved it is, it is the first slide of your deck, but I believe it should be made at the end. Because once you've created that entire deck, once you've created that entire story, once you've communicated to yourself what your business stands for, then it will be much easier for you to come up with how to summarize all of that in one line. I mean, it's easier said than done. But yeah, the best founders that I've spoken with arrive at this answer not at the beginning. And they arrive at that answer towards this entire process of creating that pitch deck, and then they get that clarity on what does my company stand for. And there are also different ways of introducing concisely, as we are calling it, right? You can either talk about what your company does. You can either talk about what your company stands for. You can also talk about your vision. I mean, let's go into some examples. I think there's no better way to cover it rather than...
And we've got very rich examples from both, a lot of these from our portfolio and some global ones as well. Yeah.
Maybe I can talk a little bit about early days of PlaySimple in the gaming space. Like if you look at this slide, like their encapsulation of the business is a deceptively simple approach to dominate casual games. And that one-liner is so powerful. It talks a lot about their approach, ambition, and what they're doing. So it's like a great way to introduce that company. And if you look at some of these global examples, right? Like if I look at Revolut, it's quite simple. Like it's personal money cloud and very succinct encapsulation of what the business does. And even for a user or an investor, it's quite easy to understand.
And this was when mobile banking was taking off.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe, from the consumer brands space, I think Blissclub comes to mind.
Yeah.
We have talked about what companies stand for. Here, this is an example of what the company is doing, right? It's enabling the women of India to lead an active lifestyle.
As simple as that.
It's what it's trying to do, right? And once you hear this line, you completely understand what Blissclub does, what it's trying to do, right? And it can be through many ways. So yeah, I mean, very good attempt at, solving it via one-liner, which communicates everything very easily. We can also take the example of Meesho. Back in the day, in the earlier avatar, the Meesho pitch deck read, turning housewives into entrepreneurs. And this is like Meesho's business banking was so complex and there were so many things moving on in that business. But these 4 words just capture the essence. And once you read these, you understand exactly what they are trying to do and what it stands for. Now there might be a lot of details, but these 4 words capture.
No, I totally agree, because the Meesho pitch deck, when I went through it, was pretty complex, and to see all of this encapsulated in that literally 3-4 word, introduction. And one of my, I think, personal favorites is Swiggy's. Their first pitch deck, it just simply says food delivery 2.0. Again, it assumes, whoever is reading this would know the lay of the land and what's already broken. And I think the most simplest, the communication of their message.
Yeah, but it's important to emphasize what Vaibhav said earlier, to say that, like, again, why a pitch deck is important is it helps the founders clarify their own narrative. So you need to do this at the end. Like, you lay out everything, you find common threads, you build out your narrative and your slides, and then this concise introduction is what ties everything together into a succinct statement.
Understood. So a good problem statement then encapsulates both the depth of the consumer problem and the size of the opportunity, or both. Cool. I think we can move on to the second principle, which is how do we captivate our audience? How do we grab their attention? And here we've almost subdivided this into 3 areas. Like founders could pick and choose either of these. Let's get into the first one.
Yeah. So I think, just to reiterate, I think once you introduce your company and painted either what the company is about or your vision initially, it's very important to grab people's attentions right up front. Like, you have to let them know why they should listen to you, right? And to your point, Krishna, it breaks down into 3 things. So I think you could do it in the following ways. And this is honestly a counterintuitive way of doing things. Like, people usually go right into like a lot of the product processes, teams, etc. And by the time they finish all of that and get to the more exciting parts about what's good about their business, they've already lost the attention of their audience. Which is why you almost have to invert this in a way to say, start upfront with the most exciting thing. And then, like, once you have people's attention, they will all automatically be curious enough to either ask you the question, or they will really want to know how you got to that exciting thing, right? So you can do this like as a founder who's building a startup today. Like, you can choose 3 ways to do this. One is like, if you have user engagement and traction, so you can really highlight deep user engagement or any sort of what is the best product market fit metric that you have right up front. Or if you are been around for a while and you have good quality growth metrics, you can show your stellar growth metrics or deep customer validation. However, if you are still in the concept stage and you don't have user engagement or product market fit or growth, then it's still worthwhile highlighting the severity of pain point. and how broken that current market is. To your earlier point on Swiggy, right? Like it's food delivery 2.0 of sorts. Like I would expect that to segue into something like why is it broken today and why is no one gotten it, or why is it such a big pain point, for example. So either you highlight that user engagement, show your growth or customer validation, or paint the pain point very severely. And we can go to examples on each of them, right? Like
I think the first one, it's an anecdote of the engagement that Facebook has had in its early days.
Yeah, it's such a simple first slide that classes are being skipped, work is ignored, students are spending hours in front of their computer in fascination.
Yeah.
Facebook craze has swept through campus. So it's just like anyone who's listening, even as a user today, like if I'm just reading this slide, it just gives you goosebumps or excitement to say like,
and does a much better job than just laying out just crude numbers. We have these many users. Yeah, we have these many app downloads or something.
If I have that as the first slide, I will sit up and be like, what's next? Please tell me what we are talking about here. I want to know what's next.
Which is why it's important to invert that almost. Like they could have gone deep into like why social media is important and why their product is best or why it's better than anyone else. But by the time you go in deep into product processes, team, etc., you might lose the attention of your audience. But starting with this automatically gets everyone's attention up, and they will pay a lot more attention to what else you have to say on the product and your insights.
I think for me also that, the third point you mentioned, which is severity of pain point. I think personally, I like that the most, because most startups, they are trying to solve some problem which exists. Sometimes they don't have the necessary customer engagement, but a pain point that I can relate to is a big one for me, and there I think Atlys comes to mind. The problem of how difficult it is to get a visa. All of us mostly, in the room had been through that. And when you see that picture, I think, sort of that slide, that picture of a line outside the American embassy.
That's just getting the appointment.
Yeah, to get an appointment, and I hard relate. And then I stand up and tell me, this is a clear problem. I've never thought about it as a problem. I assumed it as status quo. Here is this founder who's come and said that
you can disturb this. Yeah,
there's a problem, and so I know that now he's going to talk about a solution, and I will stand up and take notice. I completely relate to this problem. So that severity of pain point, if you can bring that up right in the beginning,
and there's also a level 2 where, sure, once you've gotten the appointment, there's just so much paperwork, and that's come out so well, visually.
Yeah, exactly. You need to paint that severity visually, like that number of documents required to go into one visa is so extensive, and all of us in the room feel it. Any investor you pitch to will also feel the same pain point, and automatically they're curious, right? And even if you look at Dropbox's example, like storage is a mess. Like it's just such a visual call to action to say, it is. Like, so, and I think the other way is like this N26 way of doing it, like say 7 out of 10 millennials would rather visit their dentist than a local bank. Like again, it paints that pain point to say that people just don't want to go to banks.
They'd rather go to a dentist than banking is that painful.
So that just presents the case of automatically gets people to finish the sentence to say, that means there's a digital bank that might work, right? And I think the third point is around showing stellar growth or customer validation. So I think here, like, if you see...
if you're like a few weeks, months into a journey, you'll have these.
Exactly. So if your product is really working and you're having that hockey stick growth, then go all out and put it up right up front to say, this is how we're growing. Anyone, whether they are a potential employee or an investor, would really be excited looking at that and would go on to partner with you in that journey. So... I would say this is how you can do it. The other way to do it, say this is an example of company in our portfolio, which just talks about like the only Indian tech enterprise to sign global enterprise deals with 3 large conglomerates globally, right? Again,
that is a rare feat in itself. Yeah.
Exactly. So having the slide up front for any investor investing that space automatically perks excitement to say that, oh my God, like tell me more. I would say capturing your audience's attention right up front is super important.
And all of the examples that we've discussed take, I think, uniquely different approaches. Like, there's no one way to capture your audience's attention. There are anecdotes, there are hard numbers. Sometimes it's just pictures of people waiting in lines, long queues.
these three logos in that space, once they're up on the slide, I'm again sitting up on my chair. I'm like, ha, bhai, tell me what's next. Like, that's the purpose, right? Captivate your audience.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at this Atlys slide, and I think a question that pops in founders' minds is whether at this stage, the problem, how they're visualizing it, does it need to necessarily relate to the investor you're pitching to? Because from the looks of it, this doesn't look like it's speaking to the investor. It's talking to like a customer.
Yeah, so Krishna, I think what you're saying is that is it better if the pain point resonates with the VC sitting in that room or not, right? But I don't think in all cases the VC is going to be the target segment of that product. So yeah, in some cases it might resonate well and good, but in most cases it won't. Like in the case of Meesho or say any other example that say or even a millennial in Europe looking for who has to go to a bank account, it's not going to relate to an Indian VC, right? So I think any founder should sort of keep that worry aside, and sort of that's why it's also important to paint that severity of pain point very clearly and visually, to say that even if the person in the room, that audience that you're pitching to, or anyone looking at the deck, if they're not your target segment, they should still be, that emotion should still be evoked to say that, oh my God, yeah, that I can imagine that can be a clear pain point.
You may never be their customer, but you can empathize with the problem directly. Cool.
Which is why it comes back to saying crafting that pitch deck well, visually showing some of these examples will make it a lot more easy for the conversation to flow.
Understood. Cool. Now that I've grabbed your attention, where does the founder go from here?
See, I think now it's time, you've introduced your business concisely, you have shown the best thing about your business, either your product market fit metric, growth, or the pain point that you're addressing. So you have everyone's attention. Now it's time to go a little deeper. You need to go deeper into your business and talk about what is our differentiated insight. Why will our product or approach win, right? And again, there are three ways to do this in our minds. One is, what do we see in the market that others don't, right? You have some found differentiated insight. That is what has really propelled you to leave your job and start up as a founder and pursue this idea, right? So can you sort of talk about what is that differentiated insight? And in some cases that is going to really stand out a lot more than others. So maybe you can choose this aspect to go deeper into. Second is, what is different about our approach to solve it, right? We have an insight, but maybe that insight is common, but our approach to solve that is very different, right? What is our wedge? Maybe we have sort of visualized a different wedge product that helps us get to a lot more number of users more easily because there's a pull for that wedge, right? And I think a combination of these two, I think it's worth addressing to also say that given the above, what we see in the market that others don't and what is our wedge, how big is the opportunity that we are solving, right? So I think in this sort of part, maybe it's not this one slide, but a combination of slides. It's worthwhile going deeper into your product approach and why it will win.
Yeah. I think the first example that we have to showcase is Swiggy. I think ties back into the first point that you mentioned is, what do we see in the market that others don't? Because at the time in 2014-15, when they did their seed, there were dozens of players who were already doing this, which means the founder, Harsha, had to see something different from what's already existing in the market. Could we go over that?
I think also worth noticing here is, and what KJ was talking about, you have to go deep. So you have to focus on the details as well.
Extreme details, yeah.
And you see that with Swiggy also, right? It's insight after insight after insight. And these are all the issues, and to an nth level of detail, right? For the restaurant, call congestion during peak times lead to loss of orders. He spent time there sitting with the restaurants. He's understood the owner's problems, right? And this, once I read this level of insight, this level of detail, you understand that who spent his time, and the insight is talking about is not surface level, right? So I think those details is what is most important here, that I have gone into the details, I have figured out a deep pinpoint, a deep insight. And then even in the solutions, right, what we do, which is the next slide coming after that, it just addresses all of them head on, right? And it makes it very simple that, okay, those are the pain points which I figured out to so much detail, and then this is the solution that I'm coming up with. And you can just tie all of them together.
Well, it's simple. It's just 4 steps, but the details behind that has been put forward in the previous slide.
Maybe I could talk about one more company in our portfolio, Dezerv. So if you look at their example, like I think this is a combination of also grabbing attention and going deeper into the product. So I think the first slide is like very counterintuitive inside, right? So most investors hate investing. And there is a silent majority of 76% of individuals who want someone to handle their investment, which is very interesting because I think at the back of our head, many of us do want that kind of managed service for managing our wealth, but maybe in an office setting or with peers, we might actually be like, you know what, no, I'm good enough to manage my own investments. So this is something I found this is top investment.
And we assume like if you've got the money, you're going to invest it yourself.
Exactly. So I think this is like an example of what they saw in the market that others don't, or at least articulated it really well to say there is that silent majority of investors who want someone else to handle their money, right? And then it goes deeper into their sort of solution, like your money, our expertise, the only portfolio you need, right? So multi-asset that's managed actively. So I think this going a little deeper on their insight that they saw, and the solution really brings that.
I think the insight led them to think about the solution, which is that their TG wants it as simple as possible. It's a simplification of the investing process.
And their thought process as a founder might not have evolved this way to say, oh, this is a pain point and this is a solution. Like, again, that's why it's coming back. It's important to lay out everything and define that narrative well. But they might have sort of come to the solution first, that this is what they're good at and hence they want to go here. But the way of just narrating that business to say, you know what, this is the real insight we saw and then this is a solution, you want to address it, really helps the founders themselves clarify the need for their solution, as well as it helps project that to an external person who's listening, like an investor.
Yeah. However, if you could talk about our next example, which is Urban Company.
I really like Urban Company as well. Again, highlights the detailed level of work that the founders had done, right? Back then it was connecting localized service providers to customers. And that was happening in the country. But again, he spent so much time, if you go to the, and he's, brought out insights from both the customers as well as the service provider, right? And look at the customer insight details. The pain points in finding the right provider, in selecting the right provider, and then the delivery and the closure, right? And I think this just shows that he spent a lot of time again. And these are real pain points. And again, the depth of work that is done. And same with providers also, right? There exist certain solutions which are not good enough. Everybody is worried. I think one more thing which they could have added here was, how many customers did they speak with? Or how many providers that did they speak with? And then, maybe we spoke to 200 providers and 80 out of 200 highlighted this as a problem, or 90 out of 200.
That would have come up in the conversation. Yeah, this is like a backbone slide, but it's not the most important thing to talk about. They might not have gone point by point.
Yeah.
But it would have almost evolved into conversation to say, you know what, this is how many people we spoke to and these are the insights.
Yeah. So just to show the level of depth and how I wish I was there in that room.
I wouldn't have imagined for just to get, great quality local services, and especially going full stack, this level of, operational heavy lifting is required. And the number of steps to just get the service person to your home is just like laid out so beautifully here.
Imagine a life before Urban Company.
Yeah, no, it's a household name for all of us.
I can talk about a global example also in Brex. Like, again, like these 3 slides talk very clearly about and go deeper into the insight that they have, right? So one is that entrepreneurs can't get credit cards. Like, again, this is a little bit of that attention grabbing slide, which gives 3 rejection letters from various providers to say why an entrepreneur is being rejected, either because they don't have any form of personal guarantees or any collateral to give. This is again a very neat insight, right? Like you would almost think that businesses should get any form of credit or credit card, but an entrepreneur who's starting out, who might be legitimate and might get venture backing, is still struggling to get a credit card or credit line from the top banks. So that's the sort of, again, talks a lot about the insight, what they saw in the market that others didn't, and articulates it well. And then it goes deeper into the product, right? So corporate cards today, even if you do get one, don't have any controls, right? So again, like managing your account payables is fairly laborious, and there are multiple systems that companies use. So, and then like this is just the summary of few of the slides, but essentially going a little deeper into the solution and hence like painting what they can become, right? So given the approach, insight and the solution that they have, what can they become? Like they start with they start with this small TG of US venture backed professional services and funds, then expand into Fortune 500 companies and then become a global B2B payments company overall. I think again, this is a dated deck.
Yeah.
Some of it might have played out.
I think we'll also discuss more about this on how they lay out their vision at the end.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that they got these, actual pictures of these rejection letters, which means a lot of this they've already validated with these founders. The severity of the pain point.
It might have happened to them as well. Like
Yeah.
he had started with a different idea. It might have happened and they might have pivoted into this. Who knows?
Great. Now that we have laid out the insights that we've gathered in much deeper details, how do the results of this come alive in our pitch deck?
Yeah, I can take that. Actually, that should be the logical next step in your pitch deck as well, right? You've done all the hard work, figured out certain insights, you figured out a solution. I think now this is this area where you talk about what are you seeing from the market once you've gone on to implement that solution, right? And this is for companies who have some traction. Of course, if it's still an idea stage, this section is not so relevant. But if you've done some traction and if you have some, tried out your product in some way in the market, I think this is the most important section. And here, I think you can communicate either qualitatively or quantitatively. Most people often think that, if you have to show impact, if you have to show traction, if you have to show results, it has to be quantitative. I disagree. We can do qualitatively also communicate that, listen, my product is working. And the problem that I've identified or the solution that I've developed, this works, right? And I think there, at least in the consumer brand space, 2 or 3 examples come to mind. I think one is, of course, Blissclub. I think the love that they were getting from the customers and the way they showed it on the deck, right? That speaks out for itself. So qualitatively, you can communicate that, listen, so many people are trying our product. And this was just one product back then, right? Just doing the black leggings. And there was organic love. And, we know on social media, unless and until the people genuinely like the product, they will not come out and appreciate it, right? If they hate it, they will come out and it will go viral. But out of superlative love, people coming out and just talking about the product. And again, this is something we validated. We did, X number of customer calls back then. And this love continued to show through, right?
Yeah.
I think same.
And I think they have a slide, again, bringing out this love from customers. But what's different in this one is all of these are influencers. And with, the following like 300, 400K sort of followers, and getting to them organically is a task. And they've done this over and over. There are like about 7-8 influencers already there in their early days. So I think largely, in most cases, I've seen founders bring the customer, reviews and accolades, but getting to that influencer is also
and tougher to do. Right?
Yeah, much tougher.
And it just means that what you figure out makes sense. We're seeing early traction. I think also something similar we saw for Comet as well. There was I don't remember the last time I know customers going to a website of a shoe company and writing down reviews and giving 5 stars. So when I saw that for Comet, it was really exciting. And then we have this slide where there are customers that are reaching out to Comet, right? On Instagram comments, please restock. I really love the shoes. When are you launching the next model, etc. And sort of customer love, also shows that you've hit you've hit something sweet, right? You've hit some BMF. So I think, and KJ, maybe you can talk about quantitatively, but qualitatively also you can show about, that you've gotten some traction and there is something that you hit.
Yeah, I think 2 points to also add to what Vaibhav said. I think one is that if you're an early stage founder without any metrics, I think you can still sort of show any results of any experiments that you've run, right? Like any maybe hypothesis you've tested, people you've spoken to, surveys you've done, focus group discussions, or like ads you've run and seeing what sort of uptake it has taken. So that is one thing. And second is also, you can do both, obviously, like qualitative and quantitative. So it's not either or. But talking a little bit about quantitative ones, I think this deck from LinkedIn in 2004 is quite interesting, which is just like a quantitative measure of saying the green line is the actual data and the blue line is what their growth projection was. So it just shows as to how faster they grew than their
own expectations. Yeah.
Right. So again, after all the hard work of showing, presenting your insights, etc., this is something which is a true testament of that working, right? And like the second slide really talks about how they've gained market share from 54% 6 months back to 73% now, and like no one knows the other name of this chart today, right? So again, two very interesting slides talking about the results of their insights. Then if you look at Meesho as well, like again, it's a very interesting chart to say how their orders and GMV are sort of exponentially growing, right?
100% month on month, yeah.
Exactly. So having some of these kind of slides really helps quantitatively show how well you're doing. And if you look at Swiggy's deck back in the day, like I think both of these metrics are very interesting. One is that customers who are retained till month 7 order 6 to 7 times a month. They might be doing 2-3 orders in the first month, but it keeps increasing. And almost 40% of their customers are retained and order it.
Like 50, half the customers are retained
Exactly.
after 7 months.
Yeah. Which is like both of these are like stellar metrics even at early stages, right? So just a testament of the product working and everything coming together.
Yeah, I think sometimes some founders have asked me, I have so many metrics in my business. Which one do I show? I think over there also, you are much closer to your business and you have a feel of which is the metric that you are most excited about, right? There is no fixed playbook there, right? Sometimes it is, as we are seeing, right? Sometimes it is orders and revenue. Sometimes it is just retention.
No. Even as the company evolves, your North Star metric might change.
Yeah. I'm saying that, you are the closest to the business. And there is some metric there that gives you the most excitement, right? Where you feel like, whatever I was trying to do, I have come up with this solution and this metric tells me that my solution is working. So there is no playbook there, right? It has to come from you, and it can be any metric. For LinkedIn, it was network growth. And market share, like for other businesses, it might not be. When you're creating a new market, there's no market share.
No, just in these examples, we've seen orders, GMV, retention, network growth, a lot of these things.
You're absolutely right. I think it goes back to the same thing. Like not only while making the deck and your narrative for frontage, you're not just laying out everything in the business and reflecting on it, finding common threads and building that narrative, but it also applies to data.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have so many data points and anything you can measure. But again, how do you encapsulate that data and find the best ways to present your company and execution, right? And these are few examples, but to have a point like what you were saying makes sense to say that it's not that these are the only things that matter. Like it could be anything that's relevant for your business.
Getting into the team, the ones who have made all of this work so far. So many questions. Just highlighting the founders, their L1 or L2 teams, their backgrounds. How do you even convince investors that you're the right fit for the product that you're building?
So I think like few things here. Again, it's not going to be one size fits all, but I would say that it's important to highlight the depth of experience that the team has in that particular space you're building. And sometimes it could be an entirely new space that you're going after, but in which case you might have to hire the right kind of people to complement your experience. And you can even highlight the first or second level team's caliber as well in that case. But it's important to say why there is a founder market fit here. It could be the depth of experience you have in that space, or it could be the differentiated insights you've built by doing some work in that space over the last X few months or years, right? So I think that is the most important thing to look at. And I think it's also important to say that you should find creative ways to highlight depth of your founding team or your first level or second level team's caliber, right? So if you look at this example of Detect, so the top right chart says that 2/3 of the team has advanced degrees. Half of the team's has engineering experience building. Half of the engineering team has experience building unicorns, right? And 1/3 of the team has an industrial background. So all of these are relevant for the business they are building. And the bottom right chart has like all the logos that the team has come from. So it gives a lot of conviction to anyone that's looking at the quality and caliber of the team that's being built out.
Yeah, I think along the same lines is the Dezerv example where they've really leveraged the leadership team's background in all related sectors, right? Where Dezerv also like overlaps.
Yeah, again, visually it's very easy to see the breadth and depth of the experience of the team they built out.
Yeah.
I think every deck has a team slide. Everybody covers the team. I think what we should notice from these examples is the way of presenting that, right? And it's not only the founders, it is the L1 team as well. And then making it easier for the other person to join the dots, right? That listen, they have relevant experience. This is where they have worked. This is the experience that they have. And you know what I'm doing with. So you can just understand that all of this tie up together, right? So yeah, and sometimes when you don't have a very detailed animal team, that for example in Blissclub, Minu herself, trying to show that, listen, I have the relevant experience. I know the pain point really well. I have the experience of building out a company in this space because of my business finance background, etc. And so yeah, everybody has a team slide. It's not nothing new, but the way you present it, how it ties up to your whole story, I think that is what's exciting.
Yeah. And this image of her playing frisbee, and she did that at national level. And what's also interesting is in the full deck, she brought this right up front to show the founder market fit, because this is something special with just Blissclub, right? And again, that's something to note.
Sometimes the team slide can be or captivate your audience as well, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just how stellar a team you have that captivates.
Again, like the most exciting part of the business can be the team, right? Yeah.
And the last example here, Mukul often says this slide from Swiggy on their, breadth of the team is something he shows every founder. Also gives an idea into the ability of the founder to hire the best talent out there. And that is again something that gives a lot more confidence to the investors. Cool. Now that we've covered almost everything that there is to know about the business, how should a founder end the pitch deck?
I think it's important to talk about ambition and aspiration. I think that's one last pillar that they should really focus on. Again, I think few points to note there is that the founder should paint their vision, right? What they believe their inevitable future will look like. And here it's again important to be ambitious and bold. Obviously, one part of it is like little bit of you do the math, figure out how much you need to raise now to get to your near-term vision. But at the same time, it's important to paint a very bold and ambitious picture of what this becomes. Like any investor who is going to invest in this company wants to invest in a large outcome. So having a founder who shows their hunger and ambition is important, right? And let's look at the example of Uber. Like, again, this is one of their early stage, I think, Series A decks, where they're talking about potential outcomes, right? Like the best case scenario is like they became a market leader, $1 billion revenue annually. Realistic scenarios of 5% of top 5 US cities, 20 to 30 million year profit. Worst case scenario, just a cab service and SF, right? But like in 21, they did 17 billion of revenue. So like when it works, it really works. So I think founders who are listening to this should really push themselves to be ambitious and bold in painting that picture, and obviously do a little bit more math to say near term, what do I need to raise to get to my near term vision, which is more realistic, but at the same time show that ambition. And again, if you look at PlaySimple's sort of vision slide back in the day, like they've really anchored anyone looking at this slide to say that, this is where we start FY16, this is where we get to FY22, and anchored themselves to like leading studios globally like King, and where those studios are. So again, like they're really setting a statement to say that we are building the studio out of India for a global audience, but we want to be in the leagues of the best studios in the world, right?
Yeah. And I know you've quoted Uber's 2021 numbers, 17 billion in bookings. 2023, that's come to almost 38 billion. So clearly they've underestimated themselves by a factor of 10-20x. Yeah, great. Thanks, Vaibhav. Thanks, KJ, for sharing all your insights, learnings. I'm sure anyone who's watching this will take away a lot of these. And I think it's a great starting point for any founder who aspiring to build something to think about how to communicate their story. And this is also a reminder that the best pitch decks tell a great story. The questions we tackled today might seem basic, but they are the same ones that trip up founders at every level. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Remember that every founder starts somewhere, usually the same questions that you have right now. And there's no such thing as a dumb question when you're building something from scratch. So keep asking, keep learning, and most importantly, keep building. And before you go, please head over to novs.elevationcapital.com. To grab this playbook, we have added this to our resources for you to download and learn from. And we've dropped the link in the comments. See you in the next episode. Until then, keep it no BS.